They say the truth always comes out. But what if the truth is buried so deep, so carefully erased, that it was never meant to be found? One night, a mother vanished without a trace. No goodbye, no explanation. Just gone. Her husband, a decorated detective, claimed she left on her own. The case was closed. No foul play. But her son knew better. A locked drawer, a blood-stained envelope, a USB drive containing a single piece of footage. His father caught in a lie. And then the messages started. Stop now, or your mother won't be the last. The deeper he dug, the darker the truth became. His father wasn't just hiding something, he was erasing it. And now Daniel Shaw was running out of time, because when the truth refuses to stay buried, someone will do anything to silence it. Before we dive into this gripping story, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this. If you love suspense, mystery, and mind-blowing twists, hit the like button. It really helps. And don't forget to drop a comment below. What would you do if you uncovered a secret that was never meant to be found? Now, let's begin. People think the truth is always loud, shouted in anger, forced into the light. But sometimes the truth whispers. And when it does, the world goes silent. The courtroom was packed, but no one dared to move. The tension hung so thick in the air that even the faintest breath felt deafening. Every gaze was fixed on the boy standing in front of the judge, 16-year-old Daniel Shaw. His pale face contrasted against the dark suit he had been forced to wear, but his hands, curled into tight fists, betrayed nothing. His voice, however, was steady, unwavering. I am not lying, Your Honor. I have proof. A collective gasp rippled through the audience, followed by a murmur of hushed whispers. At the defendant's table, his father, Thomas Shaw, sat rigid, his expression unreadable. A man once celebrated as a decorated detective, now a figure of quiet scrutiny. His sharp eyes, the same ones that had cracked countless cases, bore into Daniel, but the boy didn't flinch. Not this time. The judge, an older man with weary eyes, adjusted his glasses, leaning forward. What proof do you have? Daniel took a slow breath, steadying himself. His fingers curled tighter at his sides as he forced himself to meet his father's gaze, just for a second. He could feel the weight of those eyes, the silent message behind them. Don't do this. But Daniel had already decided. The truth had been buried long enough. He turned back to the judge, his voice clear, his words deliberate. The night my mother disappeared, my father was not where he said he was. Silence. No objections. No outbursts. Just a cold, creeping tension settling over the room, curling around each person like a phantom. Thomas Shaw didn't react. Not a twitch, not a flicker of emotion. But Daniel saw it. The way his fingers, resting against the polished wooden table, tightened. Barely. Almost imperceptible. Almost. It was the first crack in a carefully built facade, and Daniel wasn't done yet. People don't just vanish. Not without a trace. Not without a reason. 2 months earlier, the rain had pounded against the windows, a steady, relentless rhythm that filled the silence of their house. Daniel had woken up to the sound of it, a dull echo in the back of his mind. But something else felt off. A strange emptiness, like the air itself had shifted. He had pushed back his blankets, his feet hitting the cold wooden floor as he shuffled toward the hallway. The house was dark, too quiet. His mother was always the first to be awake, her soft humming filling the kitchen as she made coffee. But that morning, the house felt hollow. Then he saw his father. Thomas Shaw stood in the kitchen, his shoulders tense, his fingers gripping the edge of the counter. A man who had spent his life reading crime scenes, controlling interrogations, leading investigations, now looking like a man who had lost something. Or worse, like a man who had done something. She just left, Daniel. His voice was controlled, but there was something unnatural about it. Something rehearsed. People change. Daniel's stomach turned. His mother wasn't just people. She was steady, predictable. She planned things, every trip, every errand, every insignificant detail of their lives. She wouldn't just leave. Where did she go? Daniel's voice was tight, his heart hammering in his chest. Thomas exhaled through his nose, his expression unreadable. She packed a bag and left. That's all I know. It was a lie. Daniel's eyes darted around the kitchen. Her favorite coffee mug sat untouched on the counter. The calendar still had her handwriting on it, a doctor's appointment for next week. But most importantly, her phone, her wallet, and the book she always carried with her, a worn paperback with creased pages, were all sitting on the hallway table. People don't leave without the things they need, and his mother wouldn't have left without saying goodbye. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. Secrets don't stay buried forever. No matter how deep you try to hide them, they have a way of clawing their way back to the surface. It was past midnight when Daniel woke up to the low murmur of his father's voice. He hadn't meant to listen, but something about the way Thomas spoke sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't the usual steady authority of a seasoned detective. It was lower, controlled, careful. The case is closed. Don't call me again. Daniel froze in the hallway, his breath caught in his throat. Case? What case? There was a pause, followed by a sharp exhale from his father. Then a single word, muttered so softly Daniel almost didn't catch it. Handled. The call ended. The floor creaked as Thomas moved through the house, his footsteps unhurried. Daniel pressed himself against the wall, barely breathing as his father walked past, heading toward his study. The door clicked shut. A lock turned. Daniel didn't sleep that night. The next afternoon, while his father was at work, he made his move. His hands trembled as he pushed open the study door. He had never been allowed inside. Not really. His father always kept it locked, guarded, like it held something more than just case files and police reports. Now, standing in the dimly lit room, Daniel could feel it, the weight of something unspoken, something hidden. The desk was pristine, every paper perfectly stacked, every pen placed with precision. But Daniel knew what he was looking for, the locked drawer. He had seen his father use it before, watched him pull a small key from his pocket, always making sure no one was looking. But Daniel didn't have the key. What he did have was desperation. He pulled a hairpin from his pocket, his fingers slick with sweat as he slid it into the lock. He had no idea what he was doing, but he had watched enough tutorials to at least try. Click. His breath hitched. The drawer slid open. Inside, neatly placed, were three things. A set of car keys, ones Daniel had never seen before. They didn't belong to his father's car, not to his mother's either. A blood-stained envelope, the edges crumpled, the stain deep and dark. His mother's handwriting stretched across the front, and a USB drive, small, unmarked. But Daniel knew. He didn't know how, but he knew. His fingers hovered over it for a moment before he grabbed it, shoving it into his pocket. Then he shut the drawer, locked it back, and forced himself to breathe. His father wasn't just lying. He was hiding something. And whatever it was, Daniel was about to find out. The truth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's pixelated. Sometimes it flickers on a screen in the dead of night, changing everything you thought you knew. Daniel sat at his desk, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. The USB drive felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in his palm. His father's secret, locked inside this tiny piece of plastic and metal. His heart pounded as he slid it into his laptop. The screen flickered. A single video file appeared. No title, no description, just a date, the night his mother disappeared. He clicked it. The footage was grainy, captured from a distant security camera, But the image was clear enough. An abandoned storage facility surrounded by darkness. Nothing unusual, nothing strange. Until a car pulled into the frame. Daniel's stomach clenched. It was his father's car. The headlights cut through the foggy night, illuminating the empty lot. The timestamp at the bottom of the screen read 2:17 a.m. His breath hitched. 2:17 a.m. That night, his father had told the police he had been at home, asleep. It was a lie. Daniel leaned in, eyes locked on the screen, his pulse hammering against his ribs. The driver's door opened. A figure stepped out. Even in the poor resolution, he recognized the way his father moved, the way he adjusted his jacket, the way his shoulders squared as he scanned the area. Then, something shifted in the back seat. A second figure. Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. The image was too dark to make out a face, but the way the person moved, slow, hesitant, almost reluctant, sent ice through his veins. His mother. He couldn't breathe. He scrubbed through the footage, eyes darting across the screen. His father led the figure toward the storage unit. The door opened, then the screen cut to black. That was it. No more footage. No more answers. But Daniel didn't need them. His father wasn't just lying. He had been there. At 2:17 a.m., and his mother hadn't walked away by choice. Daniel swallowed, his throat dry as dust. He had to act. But he couldn't go to the police. Because his father was the police. Secrets are dangerous. But the most dangerous ones? The ones that aren't just hidden, they're erased. Daniel sat in the farthest corner of Riley's garage, his fingers tapping anxiously against his knee. The USB drive sat between them on the cluttered workbench, like a loaded weapon neither of them wanted to touch. Riley pushed up her sleeves, her sharp green eyes locked onto the screen as she ran through the police records. She was the smartest person he knew. Tech-savvy, relentless, the kind of person who didn't believe in dead ends. But as she clicked through case files, her face changed. Her usual confident smirk faded. Her fingers slowed. Then she stopped typing altogether. "Your father's last 5 cases." Her voice trailed off, her brows knitting together. "Daniel, they're all connected." He sat up straighter, his stomach tightening. "Connected how?" She hesitated, scrolling through the files again. "They all involve people who went missing, every single one. No bodies, no leads. Just gone." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle deep in his chest. His father had worked homicide for years. He had solved cases that made headlines. But now Daniel saw the pattern. 5 cases, spanning over the last decade. Different names, different circumstances, but the same result. Daniel. Riley suddenly sucked in a sharp breath, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Something was wrong. Her eyes flickered with disbelief as she stared at the screen, her face pale. "What?" Daniel asked, his throat tight. She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone wiped the police database clean. His pulse skipped. Riley looked back at the screen, shaking her head. "Your mom's case file, it's gone, like she never existed." A cold chill spread through Daniel's veins. This wasn't just a cover-up. His father wasn't just hiding the truth. He was erasing it. Fear isn't just the feeling of being watched. It's knowing that someone, somewhere, is always a step ahead. Daniel's hands trembled as he typed, his pulse drumming against his skull. The plan was simple. An anonymous tip, a digital breadcrumb leading to the truth. Riley had set up a fake email account, carefully masking their location, wiping metadata clean. The recipient? Elliot Grayson, an investigative journalist who had made a name for himself exposing corruption, the kind of guy who dug his teeth into a story and never let go. If anyone could take this and run, it was him. Riley hovered over the send button, her fingers twitching. "You sure about this?" she asked, glancing at him. Daniel exhaled. We don't have a choice. Riley nodded and clicked. The message was gone. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it pressing down on them. The air was thick, electric. Then Daniel's phone vibrated. He frowned, pulling it from his pocket. Unknown number. No sender, no caller ID, just a single message staring back at him. I know what you're doing. Stop now. The breath left his lungs. Riley noticed the way his hands froze. What is it? He turned the screen toward her. Her face darkened. That's impossible. I masked everything. There's no way they could trace it back to us. Before Daniel could answer, his phone buzzed again. A second message. Or your mother won't be the last. The world around him seemed to tilt, the walls of the garage pressing in. His mother. His throat tightened, his vision narrowing on the screen, the words branding themselves into his brain. They weren't just being watched. His father knew. Guilt has a smell. It lingers in the air, thick and suffocating, even when the person wearing it pretends it doesn't exist. Daniel heard the front door creak open long before he saw his father. He was home early. Too early. The kind of early that meant something had changed. Footsteps. Slow. Unhurried. A predator circling its prey. Daniel forced himself to keep his breathing steady as he sat on his bed, his phone gripped tightly in his palm. He slid his thumb over the screen, subtly opening the recording app, pressing record just as the footsteps stopped outside his door. A pause. Then, knock. Knock. We need to talk. His stomach clenched. The door swung open before he could respond, and there stood Thomas Shaw. Calm, calculated. But something was off. His usual air of absolute control was fractured. You've been looking into things you shouldn't, son. Daniel swallowed hard, tightening his grip on his phone beneath his desk. Don't react. Don't let him see the fear. Where is Mom? His own voice came out uneven, raw. His father sighed, a slow, deliberate sound. Then, without answering, he walked over to the liquor cabinet. Poured himself a drink. The ice clinked against the glass as he swirled it, watching the liquid move like it held the answers he wasn't ready to say out loud. Sometimes, Thomas finally said, people find out too much. The words slithered through the air, wrapping around Daniel like a noose. His heartbeat slammed against his ribs. His mouth was dry, but he forced the words out. Dad, did you... Stop asking questions. Sharp. Final. Daniel's nails dug into his palms, but then something happened. Something small, subtle. His father lifted the glass to his lips, and his hand trembled. It was barely noticeable, the slightest shake as he took a sip. But Daniel saw it. Thomas Shaw was scared, not of being caught, not of the law, something worse, something bigger than both of them. The truth should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to crumble beneath him. Riley had sent everything, the video, the files, the timestamps, every lie, every missing name, every erased record. It was out of their hands now, beyond the reach of fireproof drawers and locked doors. Daniel hadn't slept. He had sat in the dark, listening to the distant hum of the city, waiting for morning to come. And then, it did. The wail of sirens split the silence. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, painting the walls in a rhythmic, pulsing glow. Tires screeched, doors slammed. Daniel barely had time to reach the hallway before the front door burst open. Police, FBI, suits and badges swarming like a flood. His mother's case wasn't just another missing person anymore. This was bigger, deeper, dirtier. Officers pushed past him, weapons drawn, voices shouting orders. And then, footsteps on the stairs. His father, dressed in his usual crisp shirt, the same one he had worn the night before, sleeves rolled to the elbows like this was just another day. But this time, there was no badge clipped to his belt, no control over the situation. Two officers grabbed him, yanking his arms behind his back, cold metal cuffs snapping shut around his wrists. For the first time, Thomas Shaw wasn't the one making the arrest. He was the one being dragged away. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, the chaos moving around him like a storm he couldn't feel. His father looked up, their eyes locking for just a second. Something inside Daniel cracked. He took a shaky step forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's over." A long beat of silence. Then his father smirked. Not panic, not anger, not regret. Just a slow, knowing smirk as he tilted his head, watching Daniel like a chess player amused by his opponent's final move. "You think I'm the only one?" The words crawled under Daniel's skin, wrapping around his ribs like a vice. The officers pulled him away, dragging him toward the flashing lights outside, and that was when Daniel's phone buzzed. He hesitated before looking down, a hollow dread settling in his stomach. One new message. No name, no number, just 4 words. "You shouldn't have done that." Daniel's fingers went cold. The nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Let me know what you think. Was justice really served, or is there more to uncover? And if you love gripping stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next thrilling episode. Your support keeps these stories coming. See you in the next one.